China sets up more hospitals to battle the coronavirus as death toll climbs to 564. German Chancellor Angela Merkel arrives in South Africa as she starts her two-nation tour. And Egypt battles high birth rate as its population hits 100 million. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. Here are more stories making headlines this hour. In business news, Saudi Telecom's entry to Egypt delayed by regulators. And in sport, Roger Federer lands in South Africa ahead of inaugural Match for Africa exhibition tie. We begin with the latest figures on the coronavirus outbreak. In China, the total number of confirmed cases is over 28,000 with 564 deaths. More than 100,100 people have now recovered. 70% of the confirmed cases are in Hubei province, where the epidemic started. Zhejiang and Guangdong provinces are the next worst affected areas, with each reporting more than 900 cases. Beijing and Shanghai have each reported more than 250 cases. The virus has also appeared in 24 other countries with a total of 216 confirmed cases. Well, not to other coronavirus developments. China is set to establish quarantine areas on public transportation, part of an effort to prevent the spread of the virus during return trips following the extended Spring Festival holiday. 10 more people on a quarantine cruise liner in the port of Yokohama, south of Tokyo, have tested positive for the coronavirus. About 3,700 people on board also face at least 2 weeks quarantine. The antiviral drug remdesivir on Thursday began being used in clinical trials in Wuhan. Over 750 patients have been enrolled in the trials. Also, patients with mild symptoms in the central Chinese city are now being admitted to 3 modular hospitals set up inside existing buildings. Meanwhile, in Wuhan, temporary hospitals have been set up to care for the surging number of patients. CGTN's reporter Xu Xingsheng has more on how these hospitals are helping.
As we know that we are still seeing an increasing number of confirmed cases right here in Wuhan and the epicenter, with the number past 10,000 today. But on a better note, that the number of patients cleared from the virus surpassed the death toll in the city right now. And just 1 day ago, the city only has some 8,000 hospital beds in great shortage. Yet with one of the 2 emergency hospitals, the Huoshenshan Hospital, already taking in patients gradually, and the second one, the Leishenshan Hospital, set to be delivered today. The 2 hospitals altogether are promising 2,500 beds, but still not enough. The city is also rolling out makeshift hospitals, turning stadiums and exhibition centers into hospitals. A total of 11 such temporary hospitals have been announced, with the first batch of 3 already up and running, promising some 4,000 beds. Yet these makeshift hospitals are only taking in confirmed cases with mild symptoms. Only if their conditions worsen, patients admitted into these temporary hospitals will be transferred to designated hospitals with better equipment. Let's now hear what experts say about these kind of temporary hospitals.
Patients with mild cases can easily walk around, spreading the virus in the community. At the moment, we don't have enough medical resources to treat these cases. Modular hospitals don't have the same level of medical facilities that regular hospitals offer, but they are adequate for mild case patients. If patients' condition deteriorates, they can be moved to regular hospitals, so we can set up a well-ordered treatment system. Such temporary hospitals use the minimum social resources, making simple modifications to existing structures to achieve the goal of rapidly expanding treatment capacity.
I've visited one of these temporary hospitals converted from a stadium in downtown area. It is definitely not the best hospital in town, being set up in just 2 days. But experts say it offers an effective way to help prevent the virus from spreading. Meanwhile, even suspected coronavirus cases with severe clinical symptoms are said to be also accepted by the city's designated hospitals for special treatment of the virus.
Well, for more on the coronavirus outbreak, we're now joined live by CGTN's Tang Bo, who's in Wuhan. Tang, thank you so much for joining us. Wuhan is the epicenter of this outbreak. What are the latest updates from the city?
Well, the Wuhan Institute of Virology has applied to patent the use of the Gilead Science drug, which is called Remdesivir, to treat the coronavirus. And the company has been partnershiping with the Chinese National Health Authorities to run a phase 3 clinical trial to assess the drug for treatment for combating the epidemic situation. And actually the drug was developed to cope with the Ebola virus, but it wasn't effective. But it worked very well on a US patient who was infected by the coronavirus, or the novel coronavirus. And the clinical trial is expected to be conducted on Thursday today in Wuhan's Jingyingtan Hospital. Back to you.
Just speak to us about the several temporary hospitals that have been made. Just give us more details on how these facilities are helping in fighting against the virus.
Yes, it's good to see that Huoshenshan Hospital has started to treat patients. A group of 50 patients infected by the virus have been transferred to the new health facility on Tuesday morning, and they are under treatment. The hospital was constructed within 9 days, able to offer 1,000 beds. As of now, 1,400 medical workers are working there to treat the patients. And the other 2 new health facilities, Leishanshan Hospital is about to finish very soon. It is able to offer 1,500 beds. And also at the same time, Wuhan city authorities have renovated 1 gymnasium and 2 convention centers into 3 mobile cabin hospitals to treat more infected patients with mild symptoms. And once their symptoms get worse, then they will be transferred to Wuhan's Jingyingtan Hospital. The 3 cabin hospitals are able to offer like 3,400 beds. And also many other designated hospitals, in total like 28 in downtown Wuhan, have been converting their ordinary hospital wards into those isolation ones so as to host more infected patients, especially those severely infected. And at the same time, state-owned enterprises, especially those the state-owned healthcare and pharmaceutical enterprises, have been working hard to stem the outbreak by providing adequate medical supplies and also offering necessary financial support and deploying trained medical workers. And many other state-owned enterprises in Hubei province and across the country, as well as some medium, small-sized enterprises, have been offering many free services, including free air cargo transportation and free power charging for those epidemic prevention and control vehicles. And they also purchased many medical supplies overseas for the epidemic control and prevention in Hubei province and across the country as well. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Tang Bo, for giving us that update. Tang Bo joining us live there from Wuhan. Well, many people in China feel the coronavirus has become the latest reason for the Trump administration to target China. We have more details on that report.
To most people, it's a global health crisis. But for the U.S. Commerce Secretary, it's a potential opportunity to boost the economy.
So I think it will help to accelerate the return of jobs to North America, some to U.S., probably some to Mexico as well.
The comment is merely the latest example of what Beijing sees as the Trump administration's hostility. By the end of January, the U.S. raised its travel advisory for China to its highest level 4, do not travel. Moreover, Washington continues to urge its citizens to try to depart by commercial means. And for those remaining in China, the precautions officially advised include not only avoiding crowds, but also stockpiling food. The White House has declared a public health emergency and is banning all foreign nationals who have been to China within 14 days from entering the U.S. In its response to the U.S. stance, China says the American reaction has been over the top. The World Health Organization is not recommending taking any measures that it says will unnecessarily interfere with international trade or travel.
The speed with which China detected the outbreak, isolated the virus, sequenced the genome, and shared it with WHO and the world are very impressive and beyond words. So is China's commitment to transparency and to supporting other countries. In many ways, China is actually setting a new standard for outbreak response, and it's not an exaggeration.
But as the outbreak continues to worsen, China says it feels its call for international solidarity has yet to be heard by the Trump administration.
Well, apart from fear and uncertainty, the outbreak has brought with it increasing reports of racial abuse against Chinese communities in Europe and elsewhere. CGTN's Nawi Jabrakel reports from London on a problem with deep roots.
I guess it's really upsetting and it feels hurtful that people see me as a threat.
Heidi Chow was on a train in London last week with her husband and children when she noticed a man leave the empty carriage they were on to move to another one.
Because I look Chinese or from East Asia, therefore I must have the coronavirus. And so it's quite hurtful to think that people are thinking that of me when I go into a room or when I go onto public transport.
She says the same thing has happened to her a number of times in the past few weeks, with people trying to avoid her in public spaces.
The risk of me having coronavirus is the same as any other non-Chinese person in London or in the UK, because I haven't been to China in the last 2 weeks. In fact, I've only been to China probably for a day trip 25 years ago.
As international concern over the coronavirus grows, it's fueling reports of discrimination against Chinese people, including here in Europe. It's led the UN to speak out on the issue, saying no amount of fear can excuse hatred. The UK government has also urged people to avoid any hysteria.
The rejection that this whole House demonstrates to any racism and insensitivity towards the Chinese community here, or indeed visitors here of Chinese origin, because that will not help us tackle this disease.
Some members of the UK's Chinese community say they've witnessed a rise in racist behaviour recently that's coincided with the spread of this outbreak. But many also say this isn't anything new. It seems dealing with racism has become a normal part of life for some East Asians, even those who were born and raised in this country.
For 20 years, Dr. Diana Ye has been studying the history of Chinese people on these shores. She says the coronavirus has been racialized as something specifically linked to China.
I think we've seen this time and time again throughout history. There's always been a kind of latent racism, I would say, against the Chinese in Britain as globally, with yellow peril from the 19th century, straight up to, we can think about SARS 2003.
Social media is also playing a role. In France and other parts of Europe where cases of racism have been reported, the hashtag #ImNotAVirus has led to shows of support for victims of xenophobia.
It's playing as an evil a role in terms of spreading fear as it is in creating forms of solidarity.
With cases of the virus now reaching the tens of thousands, focus is on containing this deadly disease. But thousands of miles away, even those with no symptoms are feeling the effects.
The epidemic caused by coronavirus has attracted widespread concern in African countries. In Zambia, Charles Sinkala, who is the president of the People's Convention Independence Party, has commended China for its quick response to the outbreak.
Remember, this is not the first time China has been hit by an outbreak of a certain virus. There was as well the SARS virus, the severe respiratory syndrome, which affected most of the population there. And I think their governance and system is very eye-noticing because they've kept the systems in place, for such an event as disaster occurs. You heard about how the hospital was put in within few hours, or few weeks or few days, to contain and quarantine those who are affected. The airports as well, they are very good systems of overwhelming, to contain the deadly virus.
Meanwhile, former Egyptian Prime Minister Issam Sharaf says that without the effective measures taken by the Chinese government, the reality of the spread of the coronavirus would be much worse.
China is a great country. It will definitely overcome the crisis in the shortest time, and it will become more stronger after the crisis, because the smart Chinese people will gather greater strength and more wisdom from it. Although I am not an expert in medicine and health, all my friends who have experience in this area have told me that all current prevention and control measures adopted by the Chinese government are of world-class professional standards. In fact, the situation would no doubt have been worse without these powerful and disciplinary initiatives, and without the unity and solidarity of the government and the people.
Well, it's time now for us to take a short break and return. More news making headlines this hour, including German Chancellor Angela Merkel arrives in South Africa as she starts her two-nation tour. And promoting literacy among children, South Africans mark World Read Aloud Day.
How will your world change today? What do you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories.
It is these people who inspired me to be that person that is seen to deliver the news.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Well, German Chancellor Angela Merkel is in South Africa for a two-day state visit. Merkel and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa are expected to discuss trade, investment, and energy issues. Also on the agenda is cooperation on the United Nations Security Council, where both countries are serving two-year terms as non-permanent members. Ramaphosa's office says Germany and South Africa are committed to advocating for world peace and security, as well as strengthening multilateral institutions and responding to climate change. He's later set to visit Angola. Well, for more on that story, we're now joined on the phone by Yolisa Njamela in Pretoria. Yolisa, thank you so much for joining us. What more details can you tell us about the visit by the German Chancellor Angela Merkel?
Well, Chancellor Merkel is visiting South Africa at the invitation of President Ramaphosa. And you know that South Africa and Germany have a strategic relationship, a relationship that is substantiated by some 72 bilateral agreements between the two nations. And those agreements provide a legal framework for cooperation in several areas. So today, as the two leaders are currently meeting, it's expected that the partnership between the two.
Well, we seem to have technical issues with that phoner. Hopefully we'll be able to get Yolisa back later on in the program. But for now, let's take a look at what's happening in Libya. After the first round of talks between representatives of Libya's two warring sides, the UN's Libyan envoy Ghassan Salamé says the rivals are ready to talk. According to Salamé, negotiations seek to extend the current truce into a lasting ceasefire. Libya's rival parties, however, still refuse direct talks. Here's Adel El Marouchi with more.
Once again, hope of resuming talks between Libyan rivals emerges. UN Libya envoy appeared a bit optimistic following the first 5+5 military committee meeting. It includes 5 senior officers from General Khalifa Haftar's LNA forces and 5 from the forces supporting Faiz al-Sarraj's government of national accord. But the two groups refused to sit together in direct talks.
There is no agreement without sitting in direct talks. Some parties do not want to sit at the negotiating table, thinking that it might make some gains on the ground with their militia. Some are supported by foreign powers, but they must realize that an armed conflict will only make it worse.
The intentions the UN Libya envoy announced on Tuesday of desires for Libyans to talk is not supported on the ground. Both parties are mobilizing their militias stocking arms, and have been breaching the ceasefire Turkey and Russia brokered.
I'm deeply frustrated with what's happening in Libya, and I think that what's happening is a scandal. We had a number of countries coming together in Berlin where they committed not to interfere in the Libyan process, and they committed not to send weapons or to participate on any way in the fighting. Now, the truth is that the Security Council embargo remains violated.
There are no common grounds to maintain the current volatile truce. GNA wants Haftar to retreat from the territories gained during his 10-month-long offensive against the capital Tripoli, while the LNA remains unwilling to retreat. Division in Libya has become so deep, none of those involved in the conflict want to participate in direct talks. The future of the country is dissipated between hopes of reaching a lasting ceasefire and the on-ground mobilization of militias, which could be a preparation for a new civil war. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
In Ghana, some opposition political parties are protesting against the Electoral Commission's decision to compile a new voters' roll barely 10 months ahead of general elections. The protest follows an announcement by the Electoral Commission that the new registration exercise will begin in April. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rafah reports from Accra.
Hundreds of protesters from opposition political parties marched through the streets of Accra against the compilation of a new voters' register. They want the Electoral Commission to abandon its plans to create a new voters' roll ahead of the December elections.
We as Ghanaians feel that it's wrong. It's total waste of our resources, total distraction of a 17 million database of Ghanaians, and asking them to go through a painful process of recapturing this data again.
The Electoral Commission, however, maintains it needs to replace the register in order to deliver a credible election. The EC has been meeting with all political parties to try and arrive at a consensus. The new governing New Patriotic Party is in favor of a new voters' register. However, the major opposition political party, the National Democratic Congress, and some other smaller parties insist there is no need for a new register. The country compiled a new electoral roll in 2012 and used it for the general elections that year and subsequently in 2016 elections. A coalition of civil society organizations under the Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition has also said there is no need for a new voters' roll for the 2020 general elections. The protesters have submitted petitions to the President, Nana Akufo-Addo, and the Electoral Commission, calling both of them to rescind the decision to compile a new voters' register. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
The long-awaited and delayed trial of former South African President Jacob Zuma hit another snag this week when Zuma's legal team handed in a medical certificate explaining why the former president was not in attendance at his pre-trial hearing. The sitting judge did not accept the note on its face value. Angela Coppola has more.
The judge, in fact, heard argument from the lead prosecutor that the judge should actually issue a warrant of arrest for Mr. Zuma. The judge agreed with two provisos. Firstly, that Zuma or his medical team leader provide evidence or proof of Mr. Zuma's illness. And secondly, the arrest warrant was delayed until Mr. Zuma has his next court appearance on 6 May.
I don't think it's so much a move on the part of the legal team. I mean, if you're an attorney and your instructions from your client are that you are ill and you're unavailable or unable to attend the court proceedings, that's an attorney's instructions. He then has to obtain proof of what his client tells him, i.e. the sick note or the medical certificate, and that's what they've received from Mr. Zuma. The problem that they're sitting with is the actual medical certificate falls far short, in my opinion, from what is required, and hence why the Honourable Judge questioned it, because there was no proper diagnosis, in my opinion. It doesn't say what was wrong with Mr. Zuma, and then to put the cherry on top, they say that he's unavailable for a period of approximately 4 months.
Mr. Zuma's next scheduled appearance is months away, and observers are wondering how deeply the judge will actually probe the ex-president's medical condition.
All that will happen is there will be a slight delay in the proceedings because now they've wasted a day, and depending on what happens on the next occasion, there might also be an inquiry. The judge might want to interview or rather call the doctor that so-called diagnosed or treated Mr. Zuma. So that proceedings might cause a slight delay.
South Africans are going to have to wait until the 6th of May to see what happens next in the trial of Mr. Zuma. Some observers are, though, expecting another attempt to delay his appearance, but it's unlikely that the judge is going to stand for that and may well invoke that arrest warrant. I'm Angelo Coppola for CG10 in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Egypt hits the 100 million population mark this week. A special celebration will take place to mark the event. But as Yasser Hakim reports, the population increase has its own challenges.
Egypt's population has been increasing at a fast pace in the last 5 decades. According to government statistics, the birth rate is about 1 newborn baby every 5 seconds. As Egypt hits the 100 million population, it comes with its challenges.
The population increase negatively affects the economic development. The population rise eats out all efforts for economic growth and creates social, economic, and unemployment issues.
Over the years, the government has launched several campaigns for birth control. The latest is 2 is Enough campaign. Calls for having a maximum 2 children per family.
The 2 is Enough campaign has reached out to 1,100,000 women who are in the youth segment and have high fertility rates. They are in the cities with the highest birth rates and also in the poorest villages in Egypt. We're working with 92 NGOs with an annual budget of 100 million Egyptian pounds.
Traditions and religious misconceptions are the main reasons for big families. 4 children per family is the average rate.
We make 2,450,000 door knock visits to the targeted women every year to change misconceptions and to explain the importance of having only 2 children per family. We make follow-up visits as well, in addition to conferences and a TV campaign by one of the famous comedians here. We have also cancelled any subsidies to families with more than 2 children. For the first time, there is a drop in birth rates from the high 2.5% to just below 2%.
Some economists are calling for the government to make good use from the population increase, especially that 2/3 of the population are from the youth segment. Youth could be the catalyst for production and development.
We have to make use of the youth through giving them vocational training and improving their skills for the employment market. They are a huge source of energy that, if well trained, this segment can be a strong force for production and exports.
100 million population is a milestone for Egypt, but it's a trend the government hopes it can do without. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
A small number of protesters gathered outside major cities in the U.S. to protest against the acquittal of President Donald Trump in his impeachment trial. The businessman turned politician survived only the 3rd presidential impeachment trial in U.S. history. The votes to convict President Trump fell far short of the 2/3 majority required in the 100-seat Senate to remove him from office under the U.S. Constitution. The Senate voted 52 to 48 to acquit President Trump of abuse of power, stemming from his request that Ukraine investigate political rival Joe Biden. Following that case, demonstrators have been calling for President Trump's removal.
I think it's disgraceful. I think it's clear that Trump was guilty. It's clear that he abused power. It's clear that he, forget the charge for Congress, but it's clear that he is guilty all around, and he should have been removed from office.
I'd hope that a couple of Republicans, other than the one, would have reacted and seen the light and, done the way they were talking. Some of them actually talked about how the president was guilty, but they still wouldn't follow through with it. So it's rather distressing.
Meanwhile, Tunisians took to the streets to protest U.S. President Donald Trump's Middle East peace plan. The plan was released last week, calls for the creation for a demilitarized Palestinian state, which could exclude Jewish settlements in occupied territory. CGTN's Adnan Shuashi reports.
The labor union is Tunisia's most powerful syndicate, with over 1 million workforce. The union called for mass protests across the country against Donald Trump's Middle East peace plan.
The Palestinian quest for freedom is a noble cause. Trump's crazy behavior and irrational decisions are rejected. We also condemn some Arab rulers' attachment to Trump policies, which will wreak havoc in the region.
Tens of thousands of unionists, students, as well as human rights and peace activists marched against the U.S. administration's plan.
We reject any form of normalization of ties with Israel because the lands of the Palestinians were seized by force. The so-called U.S. peace plan is immoral, inhuman, and pushes for violence in the occupied territories.
The National Bar Association joined the protest. Over 8,000 lawyers slammed the Trump peace plan and rallied in front of the courthouse in Tunis.
The U.S. president does not respect international law, recognizing Al-Quds as the capital of the Zionist regime and stealing more Palestinian land. This plan is not a deal, but rather the theft and continued injustice of the century.
Tunisians from all political affiliations and parties protested on Wednesday. President Kais Saied criticized the deal of the century, the new U.S. plan for peace between Israel and the Palestinians, calling it the injustice of the century. The plan has received widespread rejection by the Palestinians over its complete bias to the Israeli occupation.
The House of the People's Representatives has also rejected the deal of the century, while denouncing the process initiated by U.S. President Donald Trump. Tunisian Parliament Speaker has urged Arab states and Arab parliaments to take position as soon as possible. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
It's time now for us to take a short break. Your business news is coming up next. Here's what you can expect. Saudi Telecom's entry to Egypt is delayed by regulators. And South African unions offer a rescue plan for the nation's broke power utility.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. It's time now for your business news. Saudi Telecom's company entry to Egypt has hit a hurdle. Regulators now say it must buy the 45% of Vodafone Egypt owned by Telecom Egypt if it proceeds with a $2.4 billion purchase of Vodafone Group's stake in the company. STC struck a preliminary deal in late January to buy Vodafone's group's 55% stake in Vodafone Egypt. Another 45% is held by Telecom Egypt. The local entity is majority owned by the Egyptian government, while 20% is listed on the stock exchange. With 44 million subscribers and a 40% market share, Vodafone Egypt is the country's biggest mobile operator. Telecom Egypt has confirmed that the STC offer would be subject to a 1992 law requiring a mandatory tender for any outstanding shares. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa is likely to back a proposal by the country's largest trade union federation to use funds from a state-owned asset manager to bail out the power utility Eskom. COSATU proposed a package of rescue measures at a meeting with Ramaphosa and business leaders on Monday. The union wants the Public Investment Corporation and two local development finance groups to invest about $17 billion in Eskom. The investment would be done via a special purpose vehicle to reduce its $30 billion debt. The PIC is one of Africa's largest fund managers. International ratings agency cite Eskom as one of the biggest risks to South Africa's economic recovery. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta has met with U.S. President Donald J. Trump in Washington. Kenya is working closely with the U.S. government in crafting a free trade agreement. If successful, the deal would make Kenya the only country in sub-Saharan Africa to have reached such a pact with the world's biggest economy.
As a country, we are very keen to seeing a deepening of the trade between our two countries. This world is big enough for all of us. We just need to sit down and find out that how do we establish win-win partnerships. I think that's what President Trump is trying to look for people in the Americas. They're saying that we are happy to deal and to trade with the world, but we want, to get the best possible deal for Kenya, be it with China, be it with Canada, be it with Mexico. So Kenya too is saying that we want the best deal that we can have for our citizens, be it with whoever we're dealing with, and that's why I will neither confirm nor deny your rumors.
The International Monetary Fund is applauding 6 East African states for transparency in the management of financial resources. This was revealed during the launch of new statistics guidelines, which are believed to be key in data collection ahead of the planned East African Monetary Union. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has more.
The IMF says it is impressed by the recent improvements seen among the 6 East African countries which make up the East African Community Bloc. The East African coordinator Harvey Joey was launching new guidelines at the EAC headquarters in Arusha that will lay the foundation on how financial data is collected among the member states. He says revenue collection in the East African bloc has also improved. He says this will benefit the 500 million East Africans. The IMF has vowed to continue to support the region in attaining the East African Community Monetary Union. The EAC Monetary Union target has been set for a deadline of 2024 after the protocol for the establishment of the union was signed 7 years ago in 2013. Under the agreement, EAC states agreed to form key institutions and maintain a set of 4 criteria for at least 3 years before the monetary union. The 4 organizations are the East African Monetary Union, the East African Statistics Bureau, and the East African Surveillance, Compliance and Enforcement Commission, as well as the East African Financial Services Commission. In heading towards a single currency plan, the EAC aims to harmonize monetary and fiscal policies. It also aims to link financial payment and settlement systems, unify policies and standards on statistical information, as well as the establishment of an East African Central Bank. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Well, China will halve the rates of additional tariffs on some U.S. products starting February the 14th. The Customs Tariff Commission says that it's in an effort to promote the healthy and stable development of Chinese-U.S. economic and trade relations. The move will halve this 10% and 5% rates on a list of U.S. products that have been subject to additional tariffs since September the 1st, 2019. The list was part of a 2-step tariff countermeasure targeting U.S. products worth about $75 billion. The move also came after the U.S. announced that it would have its 15% additional tariffs on Chinese products worth some $120 billion also on the February the 14th. Argentina is battling to resolve its debt crisis and avoid a 9th default in the country's history. Latin America's 3rd largest economy aims to restructure around $100 billion of sovereign debt this year. The government hopes to finalize negotiations with creditors, including the IMF, by the end of March. CGTN's Joel Richards reports.
Argentine President Alberto Fernandez this week concludes his visit to Europe. Ahead of vital debt renegotiations, he sought support from fellow heads of state.
Resolving the debt issue is necessary for us to grow.
And even a papal blessing. Argentina's economy minister Martín Guzmán met with IMF director Kristalina Georgieva ahead of talks in Buenos Aires next week. And the governor of Argentina's largest province eased fears of a default, paying creditors in full. Argentina is in the midst of a debt crisis, and this week is the first of many crucial weeks as the country seeks to avoid a 9th sovereign debt default. Argentina faces renegotiating debt to the tune of $100 billion, including repayment of the largest loan ever handed out by the International Monetary Fund. Economy Minister Martín Guzmán has repeatedly said that Argentina wants to honour its debt obligations, but to repay that debt first, the economy must be able to grow. And of course, for the economy to grow, the debt renegotiations are absolutely crucial. On Wednesday, the Argentine Senate debated approving a debt sustainability bill passed in the lower house last week. But one analyst says creditors still want an answer to a key question.
What is lacking is information about the economic policy, about what the economic plan is to untangle the productive sector that has not grown for 8 years.
Domex says Argentina's current crisis is at a critical phase.
There have been 3 dramatic chapters in the past 40 years. One was hyperinflation in 1989, the other was the crisis of 2001, and the third chapter is now, which is different but has the same consequences.
Argentina wants negotiations with creditors over debt restructuring concluded by late March. Joel Richards, CGTN, Buenos Aires.
More news coming up after the break, including promoting literacy among children. South Africans mark World Read Aloud Day.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Canada, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We go to South Africa, where the love and appreciation of storytelling took center stage in schools, libraries, and public parks for the celebration of World Read Aloud Day. In Cape Town, learners from impoverished communities of the Cape Flats gathered in the historic company gardens for a day of fun and reading aloud. The day was started as a global initiative to draw attention to the importance of reading to children. CGTN's Travis Andrews has this report.
If you're happy and you know it,
in more than 173 countries, World Read Aloud Day is challenging participants to grab books, share stories, and read aloud. And kids in the mother city have also heeded that call. They read aloud, and so did local librarians, teachers, and community leaders, as part of efforts to promote what the day is all about and the importance it has in strengthening literacy levels in children.
We're celebrating World Read Aloud Day today on the 5th of February with 104 libraries reading aloud today in the various communities. And today we thought to put 6 of our libraries with their schools in the company gardens to make sure that there's a celebration, so one section to celebrate. So we've got about 600 children here today celebrating World Read Aloud Day in storytelling.
But reading in South Africa is not just fun. It's critically important for the cognitive development of children who are growing up amidst a time of binge TV watching and online video sites. For many kids here, though, the day is an opportunity to dream through books. And reading aloud is an opportunity to share that dream with others.
I think it's exceptionally important to be a part of an initiative like this today, Read Aloud Day. I think, coming from the Cape Flats myself, it were those storybooks that gave me a window into the world. Coming from our home where we didn't have a lot of money to travel and do those kind of things, the books became our window into the traveling and to seeing what the rest of the world is like.
And the same goes for many other kids in South Africa who grew up with a lack of resources such as books. But as part of efforts to change this, children's literacy group Nali Bali publishes a children's story in the 11 official local languages every year on World Read Aloud Day. For many kids from the Cape Flats, reading can be a fairly expensive endeavor, but the city's public libraries do play an important role in providing them with quality reading materials. Of course, school books usually don't get the same amount of enthusiastic readers, but when it comes to playbooks, it's another story.
I love the three bears, the three pigs, and most important, it is Goldilocks.
Of course, the success to this day has always been good readers and good books, and judging by the responses of these lot, they'll certainly be reading aloud for many years to come. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Well, here's some of the action you can expect in sports news after the break. Roger Federer lands in South Africa ahead of inaugural Match for Africa exhibition tie against Rafa Nadal.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa.